So here it is, the computer that has carried this channel from late 2016 to just before this summer. And this PC is really special to me due to how it's the first PC I've built from scratch. So what's the story behind it and what does it pack? Well, you're soon to find out, but first I want to thank you all for tuning in and also for the great response towards my previous huge collaboration video about PlayStation with budget builds, basalt, Sly and icebergs. But I'm also thankful how we reached over 500 subscribers, which is really exciting. So with that out of the way, let's get looking at the mighty ComputerCatGaming. Okay, so the story about this computer started way back in October 2016 when my brother came home with a pile of parts he had acquired from a container in his neighborhood, and of course I took a look at the parts, which I then put back together. And indeed, so was I very excited because all of the computers we got at the moment was either not mine or just plain out old and slow, like my grandma's old dual-core Vista desktop PC, which was my own computer at the time. Though sadly the motherboard died, so it's now unusable. Though back to the container PC. Well, what I got from my brother was a P5QE motherboard from Asus. A good motherboard with loads of overclock functionality and sadly no I/O shield. I also got 4GB of mixed DDR2 RAM and an Intel Core 2 Duo E8500 running at 3.16 GHz. And well, this is how it looked like for a while. Paired with a spare Radeon HD 7470 and 5400 RPM 500GB drive. And well, of course, so did I want it to actually look like a PC and not a pile of so I ordered a cheap case which would satisfy my needs. Though that is now irrelevant as of January 2019 since I got a new case which I transformed the build to, since that case that I previously got for this PC will now be used for another project in the future, but more on that another time. But if we go back to the prior case swap era, it was sitting there under my desk like a true PC, but something was missing. Yes, a graphics card that actually could run games newer than 2012 with decent settings, so I got this Asus GTX 750 1GB card from a classmate for 100 Swedish crowns, which was around $11 at the time. And it was a decent card holding great performance for what I paid for, but then another convenient thing happened. Our Asus R7 2GB card downstairs in our family PC was running at insanely high temperatures, which was mostly due to the small case that the PC got, which resulted in terrible airflow. So I saw this as a great opportunity to switch my GTX 750 for that R7 and yes, they are quite similar performance-wise, but the R7 got an extra gigabyte of VRAM, but it does require a PCIe power cable, since it does pull some more power since it's the Asus overclock version of the card. And like any sane person, I then after upgraded my RAM to 8GB holding 4 2GB DDR2 PC2 6400 sticks from Samsung, but then I encountered another thing that was bugging me. That dual-core E8500 was really slow in more modern CPU intensive games and other processing demanding tasks, such as video editing. So I went from that dual-core to a quad-core one, the Intel Core 2 Quad Q8400. And I gotta say, that was a worthy upgrade. The Q8400 also runs on the LGA 775 socket line, like most in the Core 2 series, and it's sporting 4 cores running at 2.66 GHz with 4 MB of L2 cache, and it's also based around the 45nm technology, just like the E8500. And from my tests, it's a heavy overclocker, reaching its limits at around 3.7 GHz. But from my experience, so is 3.6 GHz the best in both performance and heat, but I'll use the base speed of 2.66 GHz and a high overclock of 3.68 GHz in the benchmarks, just to give an indication in what range of performance it delivers. So before I jump into any benchmarks, I just wanted to make clear what operating systems it's running at the moment. It's both a 32-bit install of Windows XP and a 64-bit one of Windows 7. And there is an issue with that, since well that R7 card is only designed for 64-bit OSs and lacks drivers for Windows XP. But luckily for us, so does the Chinese website for AMD actually offer a China Coffee Windows XP driver that supports the R736 card, though I wonder why they would make a driver supporting this card for Windows XP for the internet coffees in China. But I guess they had a lot of spare cards lying around, they couldn't let go of Windows XP, even after 2015. And really, I shouldn't be the one to ask those questions, since I'm doing pretty much the same thing with this computer. And even though the drivers does work quite well, it does not include the Catalyst control panel. So what I did was to put in another AMD card that got the official driver supporting the control panel, and then choose to only install the AMD Catalyst control panel, which would stay when I installed the China Coffee driver for the R7 which then gave me full power of my R7 360 card in Windows XP, which is way overkill for the XP era. And yeah, I do know it's possible to make a custom driver with the Catalyst control panel included, but I'm not that good with that, so that's why I went with my silly little method. So now when we got all the details, why not look at some benchmarks? And what better way to try the CPU with Cinebench? And from what I previously said, I'll show two benchmarks for the base clocks and the 3.68 GHz overclock. And the results came in at 269 points for the stock speeds and 364 when overclocked. So there's 100 points differentiating the two, which is quite a jump if I'd say so myself. But over to some actual gaming benchmarks, and I will first mostly cover the results for the base CPU speeds, but the overclocked 3.68 GHz config will also be on the screen for those who wants to see those. And what better way to try a PC that's mainly used for gaming than running 3D Mark with the Firestrike benchmarks. And it holds up quite well, getting a score of 3556 at base speeds and 3864 with overclock. And do keep in mind that with this and the following games, they were all rendered in 1080p and also recorded on this PC, so the gameplay that is in this video will suffer from lower frame rates than when normally shown, so do keep that in mind. So over to the racing game Dirt 3, and I gotta say that it runs quite well, getting an average of 59 FPS with a 1% low of 53 FPS, while running at the highest settings at 1080p, though I did go with just a 2x MSAA, and it looks and runs very well. And next off is a popular one, yep, Fortnite, and to be honest, I never play this game, so hence why I'm the newbie player that I am, but away from that and how the game performs. And well, I did run it at 1080p medium settings with VSync off, but it really didn't matter to lower more since it was the CPU holding it back, getting an average of 48 FPS and a 1% low of 2 FPS, which is indeed very laggy. But playing while overclocked makes it much better, outputting an 55 FPS average and a 1% low at 11 FPS, which still isn't great, but by any means at all, but a lot better, so yes, it can play it, but it's really the CPU that is holding you back. However, I have some memory that it did run better in the past, so maybe it's running so bad because of an update or something. I'm not really sure, but I would not recommend this for Fortnite. Okay, so since Fortnite didn't work out that well, why not try another demanding game like Grand Theft Auto 5? And yes, here it is, and well, I went with 1080p low/normal with 2x MSAA, benchmarking the last part of the built-in benchmark, and even on the base clock, so does it stay around 40 FPS and only dipping down to 19 FPS on its 1% low, which is only a few frames lower than when running at 3.68 GHz. But it's a playable experience, staying over 30 FPS for almost all of the time, so I can't really complain. And actually, so did I benchmark both Skyrim and Oblivion, but both ran great, so I decided to just include the more demanding special edition of Skyrim, which is more similar to Fallout 4 in how demanding it is. So I went with 1080p with TAA, lens flare, ambient occlusion, and low on the rest except shadow distance, default quantity, and grass distance. And I made a new save without mods, trying to escape Helgen, and during all that action it was hovering around the high 40s, and the 1% low stumbled down to around 30 FPS, which is still quite nice. And the overclock made it a little more stable and stayed closer to 50 at most of the time. I also benchmarked The Sims 3 at 1080p highest, and it mostly stayed around the 100 FPS mark, and the 1% lows were over 30 FPS, which is a great experience for The Sims 3, so I'm pretty sure that The Sims 4 should run pretty much the same on this. Last game I tried running on Windows 7 was Minecraft version 1.13, the Java edition. And since Minecraft is mostly CPU bound, it had a big difference between the base clock and the overclock speeds. So I had everything on the highest on 1080p, but with only 8 chunks, since that's the most demanding setting in Minecraft for weaker CPUs. And on 1.66 GHz, while building a house, it floated over 100 FPS. But when chunks were loading, it could go way down to 25 FPS shown in the 1% lows. But while overclocked, it's a completely different story. Going for the double FPS, now hovering over 200 FPS, only getting down to 40 FPS in its 1% lows instead of 25 FPS, which is a huge leap. So that was those games on Windows 7, but what about older titles running on Windows XP? So since I did 3D Mark before, I decided to run an old version of 3D Mark, 2000 in this case, and I had some troubles getting it working, but it was mostly due to missing DLL files, which once I got those, it ran magnificently on the default settings, getting a score of 28,339, which is 2.4 times higher than the 11,763 my TravelMate 6460 got back in the day. So moving on, we got LEGO Racers 2, and it was configured with the highest settings with 4 times anti-aliasing through the control panel, running at a resolution of 1280 by 1024 with VSync off, and it got an average of 93 FPS, only dipping down to the 50s in its 1% lows. And on the overclock config, I accidentally had the VSync turned on, so that's why it only averaged at around 60 FPS, which is entirely my fault. Still, I expect it to perform at around the 90 FPS range, so this is definitely the best way to play this game. And the final game I tried on this machine was Battlefield 2 on high settings with 1280 by 1024, and it ran extraordinarily well, pulling out an average of 99 FPS and only going down to 69 FPS on its 1% lows. And that was all the games. But if you thought we were done, then well, then you're wrong. Otherwise, congrats, because we got one final test, and that's video editing. So first of all, my main video editing software is HitFilm Express, and it's quite a demanding piece of software that offers tons of functions and effects. So what I did was to mash together a 1-minute video containing my intro, replaying 11 times going forward and reverse, each time with a layer with a spinning hypnosis ball spinning all over the screen with low opacity with fire in front of everything. So what I did was to export this thing with following settings: 1080p, 60 FPS, with a target bitrate of 10 megabytes per second to 15 megabytes per second max bitrate. So here is the results with the different configs. And looking at them, we can see that the Q8400 struggled quite well with the export times, getting 25 minutes and 33 seconds at stock speeds, taking 28% longer to render than the 19 minutes 51 seconds it gets when overclocked. Still, even when the Q8400 is overclocked, it's still no match to the i5 2500K when running at stock 3.3 GHz with non-turbo, which got over 2 minutes faster, clocking in at 16 minutes and 44 seconds. And that was everything I want to show for this video, and I hope you enjoyed taking a look at my Quad. And yeah, this is one of my primary PCs. And yeah, I still use it, because yes, I live at 2 places due to school, and I got my Q8400 during the days I am away from home, and my 2500K during weekends and other holidays. So I hope that makes sense. But I still think it's a very usable PC, and it's still going strong, but with Windows 7 ending support very soon next year, we could potentially maybe see a Linux video around this computer to make it more relevant. So maybe that's something to look forward to? I don't know, it's something for you to judge. Still, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, to prove that you watched the whole thing, simply press the like button and post a comment including the Lenny face. You can copy it from the description if you want to, and that was everything for now. And see you guys next year. Bye bye. Okay, seriously, I got some more videos coming up real soon.